Picture this. You just made the third game in your relatively niche strategy JRPG be a massive success. And now, you have to make the fourth entry of the franchise even better than the last one. What do? It's quite simple actually. You create the game known as Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. Let's start by taking a look at one of the main reasons that this game is so popular, and that is its story. This game's narrative is very standout. It involves things such as religious persecution and an attempted genocide, as well as incest between two half-siblings. And I don't mean the Fates type of incest, where you're not actually related to each other, but actual half-siblings. I won't go into spoilers for the sake of the 4 people watching this who haven't already been spoiled on this game. However, you should also be aware that this game's characters have like 5 lines of dialogue total each, minus a few handful of exceptions. So this isn't exactly the most character-driven narrative out there, but I'd say it's still worth reading through the cutscenes on your first initial playthrough. Now, although I just said the story is nothing too special, one thing that I will shamelessly compliment about this game is its story gameplay integration. These maps aren't just big for the sake of being big, but rather, according to Kage himself, they're meant to reflect the grander scope of this game's story. These maps also allow us to view events in real time as they're happening in the story, rather than being told them through the lens of a cutscene. And seeing these characters actually move around and perform actions really does improve this game's immersion. However, not only is this game a highly immersive experience, but also a well-paced one as well. There's pieces of information you obviously receive at each castle as you capture them, but there's also little tidbits you can get from villages and such, which stops the story from feeling like one massive info dump, which was definitely a problem for some of the other games in this series. The presentation of this game's story isn't the only thing that Genealogy has to offer, as this game's UI is also top-notch. Everything's condensed into 2 pages and formatted quite nicely, and the fact that this game's sprites look pretty damn nice is also much appreciated. And unlike Mystery of the Emblem and some of the other games in the franchise, the character stats screens cover the entire screen, and you can't see the maps in the background while you're viewing it. Now you may be thinking caring about a minute detail such as this is stupid and not worth mentioning, but I assure you, not being able to see the backgrounds in these screens makes all the difference when you've been playing these games for several years now. And if what I'm saying didn't matter, then they wouldn't have carried over these small changes in the stats screen to future titles. On the topic of presentation, we should also acknowledge this game's animations. Now, contrary to what those filthy casuals, whose favourite Fire Emblem game isn't made during the mid to late 90s, the GBA Fire Emblem games aren't the games in the franchise with the best animations. The SNES Fire Emblem games have objectively better animations, the sprites are more detailed, and they don't reset to their default pose like the GBA Fire Emblem games do, which helps make the battle animations flow better. Kage didn't just do it first, he straight up did it better. Subjectivity aside, these animations are seriously underrated, and deserve much more credit than they get compared to the other Fire Emblem games which have overly flashy anime-esque animations in comparison. But that's enough about the game's looks. Let's talk about mechanics. And let's start off with the most controversial one, the pursuit skill. For those unaware, traditional doubling doesn't exist in Genealogy of the Holy War, but rather only those with the pursuit skill can actually double attack. Now there's plenty of arguments for and against this system, and it's one of the valid criticisms of Genealogy of the Holy War that I can actually see people having. However, I personally really like this system and its attempt at balance. For one, given how enemies are slow as hell in this game, restricting the amount of times you can attack per combat round is how this game attempts to make their enemies last longer. And the developers of this game also made some unmounted classes such as Myrmidons and Archers have Pursuit as a class skill, to help make them less inferior to their mounted counterparts. It also makes batches of enemies like the ones in Chapter 2 more deadly as a result of having the skill. It's a mechanic with ups and downs that deserves its own video that I can't fully explain in this one. But anyway, let's move on to the second skill worth mentioning, and that is the critical skill. Criticals have changed from doing triple the damage to simply doubling your attack stat, which is a pretty nice change, and works well with the fact that enemies in this game have large amounts of HP. And more importantly, only those with the critical skill, or those using a weapon with over 50 kills, can actually trigger a critical hit, which I'd argue is actually a good thing, seeing as this game's 1 RN system is already punishing enough as is. So having every enemy able to crit would probably lead to a lot more people dropping this game. And besides, giving RNG less input in your strategy game is probably a good thing anyway. But anyway, Criticals weren't the only feature heavily associated with Fire Emblem that got shafted or significantly changed in this game, but the trading system also got the axe. You can no longer freely trade between units, and now have to buy and sell weapons at the pawn shop. Although having no direct trading may seem barbaric to modern Fire Emblem fans, this system of individual gold pools is actually pretty well done in the context of FE4, as you can get gold from arenas and villages, as well as trading between lovers, which adds a nice little bit of inventory management into this game. But also adds a nice bit of thief utility as well, as every time a thief lands a hit in this game, they steal the enemy's gold, which they can then redistribute to the rest of your army. It's a well-made system which sounds painful on paper, but is actually quite good in practice, and makes this one of the more unique and interesting Fire Emblem games today. Of course, none of the things I mentioned would really matter if this game wasn't accessible to newcomers, but with a built-in autosave and one of the best lords in the series being available in this game from turn 1, this game is more than easy enough to beat once you get the hang of the mechanics. And despite the lack of re-releases, this game has many English patches, and is one of the more popular pre-Awakening games in the series. And besides, Nintendo doesn't actually want us to buy their games, and they'd rather go for the subscription-based approach. So honestly, pirating this game is actually the morally correct thing to do in this scenario. But the real reason you should play Genealogy of the Holy War, really, is because there's no FE4 Remake. You guys can stop coping. It hurts to watch, honestly, at this point.